We'll just wait a few more minutes just to see if anyone else comes, I think.
Hey, Jess and Maddie, Jane here from Skyline. Great
Hi,
to see you all set to go. Exciting.
Yep. Very exciting.
Yeah, indeed. Maddie, you have been such a champion through this series, popping up everywhere, helping out on so many subjects, and also popping up in video, which is wonderful as well.
I know the video really took me by surprise, but you know, I'm happy to show it.
Yeah.
I've actually I don't know about you, Jess, but I'm like on uni exam, like mid-sem assessments at the moment.
Yeah.
Not but like it's pretty, like I've just finished them, so it's a bit more subdued at the moment.
Yeah, no, same. I've had heaps of assignments. I've got the last one due today, so after that, I'll be stress-free.
Harsh.
What subject is it?
For physics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's all right. I've pretty much finished it already, so should be yeah.
It's all about organization, isn't it?
Yeah, especially this week.
Yeah,
preparing for this as well.
Have you been doing many subjects for Skyline, Jess?
No, this is my only subject. Yeah.
Jess is specializing in this one, which is wonderful.
Very good.
Yeah.
So Jess, you have some UBS videos to be sharing during the day as well. And the evaluation. Hi, Lily. How gorgeous. The evaluation at the end. If participants ask about how to access the recording, they just need to go to the skylinefoundation.org.au and sign up there to register. Now, have you met Andrew, Jess?
Yeah, we said hi before.
Andrew is going to be
We've already done our hello. This is the voice in the background guy.
No, Andrew will be ever present, although there may be a delay because he has you in one ear and Bridget in the other ear, who's running economics simultaneously. So, but know that he will absolutely be there to keep an eye, and I'll be around as well. So if you ever get into any strife, you've got backup.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
That said, it is Zoom, so strife is extremely limited.
How gorgeous. Lily's asking for a timetable. Jess, I think you're going to go through that in a moment, aren't you?
Yep. I'll go through the agenda.
Why don't you make a start? Why don't you get going? Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Skyline Exam Revision Series for English Language. My name is Jess. I'll be the tutor for today, and we have our UBS volunteer, Maddie, if you want to wave, Maddie. So you can go to us if you have any questions. I've set up a thing on Mentimeter. You may be familiar with it from past lectures if you've been to them, where you can basically ask questions and you can like upvote questions that you think like are relevant to you, and I'll answer them at the end. Or you can, of course, use the Zoom group chat because we have quite a small group today, so we'll be able to keep tabs on that. And I'll just share my screen. Can I just get a thumbs up that people can see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, amazing. So this is the English language tutorial. We'll go through some Zoom etiquette first. So of course, just turn your mobiles off. Try and close down all the open tabs. We'll stay on mute while you're not talking. Jane, are we allowed to have questions, or is that not part of the recording?
Sure, it's your show, Jess.
Yep, no worries. Seeing we're a small group, I think we'll have times for questions at the end. You're welcome to turn on your video while we're saying hi if we want to see your faces, but then I'll ask you to turn them off when I start the presentation. And so I talked about the questions for the chat button before. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, which we are gathered on today. And for me, I am gathered on the land of the Wurundjeri people. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, for they hold the memories, the traditions, the culture, and hopes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples across the nation. Okay, so we're going to look at the agenda for today. So at the moment, we're just going through the welcome. We'll have some introductions, and I'm giving a brief overview of how this session will work. Then I have a quick warm-up. I've set it up on Mentimeter, which I mentioned before. And then I'm going to go over the VCAR study design. And I'll talk through like what you need to know, what VCAR expects of you. And then we have 3 content blocks. And basically, I've broken it down into the 3 sections of the exam. And also content block 3 will be more looking at finding contemporary media examples, which you should know is an important part of the essay section in English language. So the examiners like really look for solid examples from the media from this year, like about language use in Australia. And of course, I'll give you some exam tips specific to the English language exam. And so a quick introduction about myself. My name is Jess, of course. I'm a second-year student at the University of Melbourne. I study a Bachelor of Science majoring in physics. You're probably wondering why I'm doing a linguistics lecture. I do linguistic subjects at uni as well as electives. So I've done things like syntax and phonetics. I've done like a language and identity subject. So I'm quite familiar still with all the English language related things, which is good. And I attended a school called Gippsland Grammar, which is in Sale, which is a town. It's about 3 hours out from Melbourne. If that's any help, it's in Gippsland, of course. And now we have Maddie, our UBS volunteer. Maddie, if you want to unmute yourself and you can give a brief introduction, that would be great.
Thanks, Jess. When you were talking about Gippsland, I just thought, is it related to the yogurt brand?
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's related. Yeah. Beef and cheese.
Yeah.
Same thing. Hi guys, I'm Maddie. And similarly to Jess, I'm studying science at uni, but I'm at Sydney, at the University of Sydney in New South Wales. So I'm studying a double major in maths and statistics and English too. So it's a nice diverse mix. I am a part of a work study program at UBS called a cadetship. So I work in the Sydney office at the investment bank, and my team is in charge of kind of helping our clients buy and sell stocks on the Australian market. So it's a good balance between work and uni, but sometimes it can get a bit challenging. But I'm very keen to take part of this Skyline program and do some English language with you guys today.
Nice, thanks for that, Maddie. We'll now play your video that you've made. So I think I just need to share my computer sound. I'll play the video. If you can't hear the sound, just let me know. Oh no, sorry.
Hi, I'm Maddie and I'm a third-year cadet in global markets at UBS in the cash equities division, and I am a third-year student studying at the University of Sydney, double majoring in financial maths and statistics and English. At school, maths and English were my favourite subjects, so I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to continue studying them after school. And I also look forward to sharing what I've learned and my study skills with you guys at Skyline. I know Year 12 can be very tricky for many, including myself, but the main thing is to try your best, work hard, listen to your teachers, ask any questions to fill gaps in your knowledge, and you won't have any regrets. You'll just be incredibly proud with what you can prove to yourself and what you achieve.
Amazing. Thanks for that, Maddie. Alrighty, guys. So now we will do our warm-up. So if you don't know what Mentimeter is, just go to the website menti.com, and I will just share my screen again to a different page. So basically there's the code up the top there. So if you go to menti.com and use the code 8865595, it should come up with a little screen, and then you'll have the options to put in like different meta language and words and everything that you think relates to English language. So I really just want your brains to get in the English language zone. So you can like put in words like phonetics or like syntax or semantics or anything related to English language. And we'll wait, and they should pop up on the screen if I've done it correctly. Thank you. Yes, this is cool. Nice. Yep, so we've got things like lexicology, so relating to words and subsystems, which is all like lexicology and phonology and all that. What about terms relating to like the analysis? So we're talking about like register or like the audience of the text or like the role of the speaker. Whoa. Yep. Very nice. Social purpose. Yeah, that's a very important one. Syntactic patterning. Very nice. Contemporary evidence. Yep, very important. What about for the essay? So we're talking about like maybe like formal language or like using formal language to obfuscate things. Yep. Awesome. I think that will do for now. And then I'll just go to the next slide. So I've just got a quick little poll. If you could just answer, so it should come up on your phone now. You can like slide the little bar across to how prepared you're feeling for each section of the exam. If you don't even know that there's sections to the exam, that's okay. I'll go through them all today, but this will just give me an idea of which ones to focus on more. Nice. Yep, so we've had about 6 responses, I think. So we're feeling most prepared for the short answer, of course. That's the easy section, so as expected. Analytical commentary, a bit less prepared, and same with the essay. So I'll focus lots on those today. Make sure you're all good to go. And of course, this is the question slide, so you can go back to this on your phone and you can ask questions as I'm going along in the presentation. And I will refer back to this when we have the breaks and I can answer your questions. Or if you find it easier, you can just use the Zoom chat. And I'll go back to the PowerPoint now. Can everyone see the PowerPoint? Can I just get a thumbs up from someone that we can see the PowerPoint? Sorry. Okay, thank you. You all good, Maddie? Okay, amazing. Okay, so we're going to do an overview of the VCAR study design. So basically the VCAR study design is like your go-to for study revision. It will tell you everything you need to know, what the examiners are going to be looking for in the exam, and it can be found on the VCAR website. You go to VC Curriculum, VC Study Designs to English Language, and you should note that there is an updated study design specifically for 2020. It's removed some things, they've crossed it out, so it's very easy to see what you need to know and what you don't need to know for this year. So basically what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to give a brief overview of the study design. I will go into it in further detail a bit later. If we have more time, I have some extra slides. So first of all, of course, we have Unit 3, and the title for that is Language, Variation and Social Purpose. So this is all about like how language varies across Australia, like different people using different language and the social purpose. So what are people trying to achieve when they use language? And this is broken up into 2 areas of study. You'll have informal language and formal language. So informal language, you may have looked for example, at a spoken text, like a dialogue or a conversation between two friends, for example, or like a text message exchange or something. And you'll see lots of use of informal language there. And for the formal language, you may have looked at something like a speech from a government person, like say, let's talk about like Dan Andrews giving like an update on coronavirus. He's going to be using quite formal language. So everyone knows that he's being serious, of course, as this is quite a serious topic. And then we have Unit 4, which is language variation and identity. So again, looking at how language varies across Australia, but now we're going to be looking at identity. So how the language use, how someone's language use reflects their identity. So basically, this is all about how the way we speak is like very reflective of ourselves, like our values and everything about us. And again, that was broken up into 2 areas of study, which was language variation in Australian society and individual and group identities. So of course, you should know that there are different levels of identity. So we have like individual, group, or like social identity, and that all makes up who we are. And now we're going to move on to content block 1, which I've said earlier is the exam breakdown and the short answer. Okay, so we have the exam breakdown. So we have section A of the exam, which is going to consist of short answer questions based on like a formal or informal spoken or written text. So you could get like a conversation, or you could get, let's say, like an advertisement or something, which would be written. And they could be formal or informal, and it's only worth 15 marks. So I do recommend trying to get through this section as quickly as possible. I'll go through it in more detail soon, but basically it's all about different meta language, and it's going to like ask you specific questions about a text that it gives you. Then we have section B, which is basically what the examiners say is they take section A, and basically what you're doing is combining that all into one big like essay type thing called an analytical commentary. So you're going to comment on the different like aspects of the text and analyze the language used in a text. And basically it can be a formal or informal text, spoken or written, and it's worth 30 marks. Then we have section C, which is the essay question. And I know a lot of students are quite scared of this. I know I was, all my friends were at school, but I do hope today that I give you lots of advice that will help you, like, first of all, choose the right essay question for you and how to approach it so you can easily write it in the exam without freaking out, which lots of people do, but that's okay. So basically it will be based on either like a Unit 3 or Unit 4 topic, so like formal language or like informal language or like the standard English or something, and you'll get a topic and you'll be given stimulus material, and you have to also use your own contemporary media examples to basically expand on your topic, and it will be also worth 30 marks. So that's a total of 75 marks, and I will go through the timing of the exam at the end of this lecture. Okay, so now we're going to move on to short answer. So basically what I'll be covering is knowing your meta language. So I will be going through a lot of the meta language that VCAR wants you to know. Maddie, if you would like to comment on any of them, of course, you're welcome to at any point, just jump in. And then I'll also be going through a way of structuring your short answers. And then we're going to look at some past exams and look at what people have struggled with. And then we're going to go through how to maximize your marks. So for this section, if you want to take notes, by the way, I recommend just having like pen and paper. I'll go through all the meta language nice and slowly, but if you would like to find the meta language, you can find it on the study design. So basically there's a whole list called meta language for units 3 and 4. And this is the list of meta language that VCAR requires you to know. So they could test you on any sorts, any meta language from this list, specifically in section A, because they may ask a very specific question, for example, about the coherence of the text, which is relating to the discourse. I have also made that list into a table, which you can find through Skyline, which I'll talk about later. So we have this quote, which goes, "Metalanguage underpins the key knowledge and key skills and provides students with the means to discuss elements of linguistic study." And this quote is by none other than the Victorian Curriculum and Assessment Authority, aka VCAR. So basically, this is talking about, like, we really need to know our metalanguage. VCAR are so big on this. Like, you will not get full marks if you don't have accurate and sophisticated metalanguage. And basically, like, knowing your metalanguage you'll be able to analyze the text much more easier if you know specific words. So this is a subsystem circle that found online, and basically it's just a good representation of all the different subsystems you need to know. And of course, discourse should be around all of them. It's basically relating to pragmatics though, but you see we have like phonetics and phonology, so that's all about like the sounds. Morphology is like the smallest unit of meaning essentially. We have syntax, which is sentences themselves. Semantics, which is the meanings of sentences and words. Pragmatics is, of course, the meanings of like the discourse itself, and discourse would be surrounding everything, and it's basically the overall text. Okay, so I'm going to go through each of the subsystems and briefly talk about the metalanguage you should know for each one. I don't have everything listed on this screen because there is quite a long list, but I will briefly go through some, highlighting some of the more difficult ones. So this is the list of phonetics and phonology metalanguage that VCAR says you need to know. So first of all, we have prosodic features, and that includes things like pitch, stress, volume, tempo, and like intonation. And this is basically, you'll find it in spoken text, and it's a really good way of like drawing emphasis. So you can analyze the prosodic features of a spoken text and what the speaker is trying to do by using these prosodic features. Then we have vocal effects. So that's pretty self-explanatory. You'll have things like laughter or coughs or breaths. Basically, it's just like a common aspect of spoken speech. Laughter, for example, could be used in a more informal, let's say like a radio talk show. Laughter could be used to like induce laughter from the audience, for example, which would hence build rapport with the audience and make them want to keep watching. Then we have connected speech processes. So we have things like assimilation, vowel reduction, elision, and insertion. So that's all about when we speak, we don't speak the way that it would be transcribed, basically. So for example, we often add extra like vowels or sounds in between words. It's basically like a very common process of talking. So for example, the word athlete, you may have heard this example before, but we actually say it like athlete with an extra symbol. And that's basically to get rid of the consonant cluster in the middle. It's very, very natural process. Then we have phonological patterning. So that's things like alliteration, assonance, consonants, onomatopoeia, rhythm, and rhyme. And I will go through these a bit more later, all the patternings like phonological and syntactic. But for now, all you need to know, you should know the definitions of everything like alliteration, and you should also know the difference in case you are asked to analyze it in section A. And of course, VCAR wants you to have an awareness of the International Phonetic Alphabet, also known as the IPA. So that's basically just how all the sounds are transcribed. I wouldn't bother like learning all the different transcriptions. It's probably not worth your time if you don't already know it. But VCAR does require that you have a brief overview or knowledge of it. Okay, and now we have morphology and lexicology. So morphology, the way I've learned it is basically it refers to the smallest unit of meaning. So it could be anything. It could be like affixes, like let's say take the suffix ing, that turns like something into a present tense verb. If you add it, say, to the end of walk, you'd go to walking. And then we have lexicology, which is the word itself. And VCAR wants you to know all these things. So yep, we have word classes. So that's just the basic things like nouns, verbs, auxiliary verbs, and modal verbs. for the word classes though, you should know all the like the nouns and adjectives, for example, from like primary school when you would learn them. But I do recommend knowing things like auxiliary verbs and modal verbs, as I know questions about them have come up on past exams because they're quite tricky. Metalanguage and VCA likes to test on that. Then we have function words versus content words. So content words are all the things like nouns and verbs, whereas function words are things like prepositions, and basically they just tie the sentence together. Affixation, of course, is adding affixes, so that relates to morphology. So you could have like a prefix or a suffix or even an infix. Inflection and derivation, so that's just basically like inflecting a word. So you could go from like a singular noun to a plural noun by adding an S, for example. That would be inflecting the noun. Then we have root, bound, and free morphemes. So these are quite important to know, I would say. Definitely know the difference. So a free morpheme can basically stand alone. So let's take the word walk again. So walk would be a free morpheme, but the bound morpheme, let's take the word walking now. So ing, the ending, the suffix, would be a bound morpheme because it cannot stand alone without really like not making sense, if that makes sense. And so the root of walking would be walk, of course. So it's really important to know the difference between all of those. And suffixation in Australian English is quite an important aspect of Australian English. I'm sure you've talked about it in class, but that's basically, let's take the word like, I remember the word dog to doggo, like adding O to the end is like adding a suffix, and it's like kind of reflective of our like funny nature as Australians, if that makes sense. Then we have word loss and word formation processes. So that's things like blending and acronyms, like shortenings and like compounding of words. So there is a long list of them. I won't go through them all, but you can find it on the study design or on the table that I've made for you, which I will show you how to access later. Then we have, of course, morphological patterning, which is like conversions of word class and creative word formation. And lexical choice and patterning, pretty self-explanatory. I will go through all the patternings later though. Now moving on to syntax. So we have phrases, clauses, and sentences. So I know back in year 12, I didn't really know the difference between all these. And I really like referred to like a random group of words as like a phrase or a clause without really knowing what I was talking about. But I do think it's really important to know the difference so that if you are analyzing a text and you do have a group of words, you know whether to refer to it as a sentence, a clause, or a phrase, because VCA will know the difference. And then if you get it right, well, you're going to get more marks, which is good. Of course, we have sentence structures. So that's like a simple sentence or a compound sentence. Again, if you're analyzing like a whole sentence, it would be really good to show your knowledge to refer to it as the correct type of sentence structure it is. You'll just impress the examiners even more. And same with sentence types. So we have things like declarative sentences, which is basically just like your very common sentences, like making a statement, like I went to the shops would be a declarative sentence. Then we also have imperative, which is like giving an instruction. So you may find lots of imperative sentences if you have like an instructional video or instructions to like building something, for example. Then we also have interrogative and exclamative sentences. So interrogative, of course, is like asking a question, and exclamative is basically like an expression of sorts. Then we have clause structure. So that's talking about like subject, object, like the complement or an adverbial. Again, there's quite a lot to clause structure. I won't go through, but it is very important to know different aspects of the text. So say you have like a noun phrase or something, like if you're talking about a specific part of a sentence, it's good to refer to it as its name. Then we have active and passive voice. Once again, I would say this is quite important to know. Active is saying, let's say, like, the dog went for a walk. And then passive voice would be like, it was the dog who went for a walk. So basically, it's just like it's hard to explain, but like where the focus is. Maddie, do you have any extra?
I think the dog's a good example. So you can say like, the dog went for a walk, and then, so 2 sentences. Number 1, the dog went for a walk. Number 2, the dog was taken for a walk. So the was taken bit is indicative of the passive voice because someone else is affecting the dog, like the dog's the object, whereas in the first sentence, when the dog went for the walk, the dog is the one that had the agency and they were able to go for a walk. But when you say the dog was taken for a walk, it implies that like it needed something else to help it go for a walk.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you, Maddie. And then we have syntactic patterning, of course, which is things like antithesis, listing, and parallelism. And again, I will go through that all later. Now we have semantics. So semantics is all about the meanings of sentences and words. So we have semantic field / domain. So that's basically when you're analyzing a text, it will have a certain semantic domain, basically, where all the words are coming from. Like say you have a specific topic that you're talking about, all the words may be relating to that topic. Then we have lexical choice and semantic patterning in text. So that's stuff like figurative language, irony, metaphors, simile, and I will go through all of that later. Then we have lexical meaning, and that's basically talking about like sense relations. So we have things like synonymy, like idioms and denotation and stuff like that. I'll talk about that more later, all of those meanings. And euphemism and diphomism. So that's basically putting something in a good light or a bad light through the language you use. Euphemism and diphomisms, they often come up in topics in the essay. So it's really good to know the difference and how language can be used in this way. And last of all, we have discourse, which is basically the whole text itself. So with discourse, we have things like code switching, which is like the practice of alternating between 2 or more languages or dialects in a conversation. Then we have coherence and cohesion. And these are very important to know. They pretty much always come up in a section A question towards the end. It's either coherence or cohesion. So coherence is all about like the overall connectedness of the text, like how it flows. And that talks about things like inference and logical ordering, formatting, consistency and conventions of the text. And cohesion comes under coherence. So cohesion is like what ties the sentences themselves together. So that's, again, talking about things like synonymy, antonymy, things like information flow. So you could have like a front focus or an end focus. I will go through coherence and cohesion very soon, as I think they're very important, and we'll go through some examples, of course, of coherence and cohesion. Then we have features of spoken discourse. So you could have things like openings and closings, adjacency pairs, and adjacency pairs would be like a question and an answer, for example. Then we have strategies of spoken discourse. So that's things like topic management, like turn taking, and like giving things like minimal responses. And then we have the transcription conventions, of course, which is just all the like conventions for transcription. They give you them on the exam if you have a spoken text, of course. It is good to know what they all mean, but they do have the meanings next to the symbols, I believe. And now we just have a list of other meta language from BCAR, And these don't really come under one subsystem. I won't go through them all, but I have in red put the ones that I think are especially important. So we have register. So that's like the formality of your text. So whether it's informal, formal. Then we have situational context and cultural context. Again, these are very important. You should always really be commenting on these in section A and section B. Then we have social purpose. So what is the text trying to achieve? Okay, so now we're going to go to coherence and cohesion because lots of students are very confused by this. So we'll have a look at some past exam questions. So from the 2018 exam, question 5 was, using appropriate meta-language, analyze the discourse features that contribute to the coherence in this text. Refer to line numbers in your response. And the average mark for that question was 2.1 out of 5, which isn't too great. And again, in the 2019 exam, we had using appropriate meta-language, analyze at least 3 stylistic and discourse features that contribute to the cohesion in this text. Refer to line numbers in your response. The average mark for that was 2 out of 5, which again is not too good. I do know with that question, lots of students actually confused cohesion with coherence, and therefore they couldn't get the marks. So I will go through now what the difference is and how to analyze a text correctly for factors that contribute to its coherence. So my definition of coherence, back from year 12, these are from my notes. Basically, it's the implicit logical connectedness within a text. So for a text to be coherent, basically the concepts and relationships expressed have to be relevant to one another. So you can't be talking about, let's go back to Dan Andrews. So say he's giving like the local update on coronavirus cases. He can't just go and talk about like what he had for dinner last night, for example, because one, people will be confused and it's just completely not relevant. So you have to, it has to be relevant to one another. Features of coherence. This was from the VCAR website. So we have things like inference, logical ordering, formatting, and consistency in conventions. And I'll go through what these mean soon. And of course, we have cohesion. So cohesion comes under coherence, basically. Then we have cohesion. So cohesion is the explicit language features that connect or bind a text together. So it's language features that enable us to understanding the meaning of a text as a whole. So we have some features. Features of cohesion include synonymy, antonymy, hyponymy, and we have things like clefting, front focus and end focus, anaphoric and cataphoric referencing. So that's basically referring to something either before it has been mentioned in the text or after it has been mentioned in the text. Repetition, ellipsis, and substitution. So for example, substitution is a feature of cohesion. Let's say you have a noun phrase and then you replace it when you talk about it next with like a pronoun, say like for the word, for example, the word it. That is reducing basically the clunkiness of the text, therefore making it more cohesive. So basically coherence, this is a like overview. So coherence is making sense of the text as a whole on a cognitive level. And cohesion is the glue or mechanical construction of the text that is holding it together. So I remember, I think it was my teacher in year 12 or something I read in year 12. You can think about coherence. Let's say you have a t-shirt. Coherence would be like the color of the t-shirt, the shape of the t-shirt, whether it has buttons, and cohesion itself would be the stitches that hold the t-shirt together. So I think that's quite a good metaphor if you confuse the two, and it really shows how cohesion is under coherence. Okay, so now we're going to look at an example of coherence. So again, we have the question which wants us to analyze the discourse features that contribute to coherence in this text. So in section A and section B, what you're going to get in the exam is you're going to get like a context paragraph above the text. And basically this will tell you a bit about the text, should tell you about the speaker or writer, a bit about their identity and like where this text is occurring. So let's read through this. So we have text 1. So this text is a blog post written by Colin Bisset, who describes himself as a writer, traveller and broadcaster. He is a regular contributor to Blueprint for Living, an ABC radio national program that covers topics related to architecture, food, travel and fashion. So right away, but without even reading the text, we know it's a blog post, so we can start thinking what we would expect to see from a blog post. So we can think there might be pictures, there might be paragraphs, he might be talking about his life, for example. We would expect to see things like links to another blog post that we might be interested in. We know that the writer, Colin Bisset, is a writer, traveller and broadcaster. So that tells us a lot about his identity already. We know that he's a contributor to the ABC radio national program that covers topics related to architecture, food, travel and fashion. So that gives hints as to what the text could be about. So he could be talking about any of these things. Now, so I've given you lines 12 to 16 from this text. So I know it's not the full text, but there are things in here where you can find discourse features that do contribute to the coherence. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you just a few minutes to read through this. And what I want you to look for is features that are contributing to the coherence. And then I will go through them with you. So I'll give you a few minutes just to do that. Okay, so let's go through the things that we immediately want to look for. So once you scan the text, you have to keep coherence in mind. So remember, with coherence, the things we want to look for is things such as inference. So that could be like the writer referring to something where the audience is required to have background knowledge to understand what the writer is referring to in order for it to be coherent. Then we have to look at logical ordering. So how does the writer order his things? I can tell you that the text was ordered with paragraphs. So there was paragraphs, and each paragraph started with something where the writer was talking about what he was doing at that current time. Then we have consistency and conventions of a blog post. Again, it's hard to see with just lines 12 to 16 here, but we do see the paragraphs and links as well. And cohesion. Now I've put a star next to cohesion because we don't want to mix up coherence and cohesion, but I do think it is important to talk about cohesion, in a question about coherence, but just make sure you don't mix up the two. And now I've just copied and pasted the lines back up here again. And now I'm going to go through what I think would be solid examples for coherence. So we have inference again. So we see on lines 13, 14, and 15 that the writer refers to Baroque and Mahler. I assume these are some sorts of musical terms. So we know that prior knowledge is required by the readers to understand these references. And it is likely that the audience of Colin Bisset, the writer, may share a similar music taste or genre to him. So it is likely that they do know who he's referring to when he says that. Logical ordering. So again, the full text is not here, but the blogger did begin each paragraph with a sentence about what he is doing, which allowed the readers to easily follow along, which makes the text very coherent. Now we have consistency and conventions of a blog post. So we have to ask ourselves, so no matter what the text is, you should ask yourself, what do you expect to see from this type of text? And we know that the author obviously wants to please their readers. So that's all down to the social purpose. And therefore, it is likely that they're going to be using common blog post conventions that their audience would expect to see. So they will be pleased, such as like extra links like hyperlinks and paragraphs, etc. And therefore then we have cohesion again. So basically, what is tying the sentences together? So basically, when you read through this, it's like someone is having a conversation with you, like the author himself is speaking to you. It has a very conversational tone. And that's all down to cohesive devices that make it very coherent to us. Okay, so this is an example of a high-scoring response to this question from the exam. Now I'm going to read through this response and go talk about each example they've done and what's good about it. So this student has gone, inference is required for the text to be coherent. So they've told us what they're about to talk about. They're going to talk about inference, and then they go on to give us an example. So they say, for example, prior knowledge is needed by readers to understand reference to the music genre Baroque, line 13, and songs such as Mad Men on line 15. So they've backed up their statement with examples, which is what you need to do. Then they've said logical ordering is another factor that aids coherence. So again, they've structured this really well by introducing what they're going to talk about next, which is logical ordering. Then they go on to say each paragraph begins with a sentence about what Bisset is currently doing, then proceeds to describe some of his thoughts as he is working, so that the reader can follow his thoughts easily. And they've explained that really well, that because the reader can follow his thoughts easily, that is why it's aiding the coherence of the text. Then we have, furthermore, consistency in subject matter is seen through the use of lexemes from the semantic field of the ocean, such as pelicans, line 17, current, line 19, and fishermen. Of course, we didn't see that because the lines were not there in the third paragraph, sorry. But I did not touch on this before, but this student has, as they thought it was very necessary to the text. So basically, consistency in subject matter, of course, is very important to coherence. The readers expect to see this stuff. If he's introduced a topic relating to the ocean, they would expect to see words from this semantic field. Then they go on to explain that this clearly indicates the topic of the paragraph, which aids coherence. Then they finish off by saying, additionally, conformity to the conventions of the text type through the use of well-structured paragraphs aids coherence. They don't need examples, they're referring to the paragraphs themselves. They haven't elaborated too much on this, but I don't think that would be necessary because there's not much to talk about in terms of conventions except for the paragraphs, the structured paragraphs of the blog post. So why was this a really good example? So we know we had solid 3 to 4 examples, so I'll just go back. They talked about inference, logical ordering, consistency in subject matter, and the conventions of the text type. And for a 4 or 5 mark question, it is good to have a solid 3 to 4 examples. They had excellent use of meta-language, so that's what the examiners are going to be looking for. They're going to look if you know your meta-language and of course can apply it accurately. It was very well structured. They used words such as furthermore and additionally when moving on to their next topic. And of course they talked about the coherence of the text specifically, rather than talking about coherence in general. So a lot of students struggle with relating to the specific text they are trying to analyze. I know VCAR often talks about it on all the examiner reports every year. They always tell the students that they need to relate it to the text specifically. And now let's look at another example. So this one is a spoken discourse. I think line 32 may be cut off, sorry, but it ends with thank you. So this is from the 2017 exam. I'll just read through it. So we have question 4. Using appropriate meta language, discuss the features and/or strategies of spoken discourse that Tim Minchin uses to manage this text. Refer to specific examples and line numbers in your response. So of course you should know by now that you always have to refer to the line numbers and include examples from the text. Again, we've been given the context paragraph. So I'll read through this, pointing out the important aspects so we can start getting an idea for what we expect to see in this text. So we have, in a pre-recorded video, Australian actor and comedian Tim Minchin gives his acceptance speech for the most outstanding supporting actor Logie at the 2016 Logie Awards. The award is for his role in The Secret River, a television drama dealing with British colonisation and dispossession of Indigenous Australians. The Logie Awards celebrate Australian television in front of both a live and television audience. So going through that, we already know a lot about the text. So we know that the speaker is an Australian actor and comedian, Tim Minchin. So the fact that he is a comedian tells us a lot about what we may expect from his speech. He may be using humour to appeal to his audience. He's giving an acceptance speech at the 2016 Logie Awards. Because it's such a big event, it is likely that this speech has been pre-prepared to avoid any mistakes or non-fluency features. Then we know what his role was in this television drama, which it was dealing with British colonisation and the dispossession of Indigenous Australians, which could give some cultural context to behind what his speech is going to be about. And it was performed in front of a live and a television audience. So the audience here is going to be very important in shaping his speech because he wants to interact with them, of course, and appeal to them. So then we have lines 26 to 31, 32 may be cut off at the bottom on your screen, sorry. So let's go through what we should look for immediately from this speech. So things we want to look out for immediately, we want to think, who is his audience? So we know there's a live audience and a television audience. Because it is a spoken discourse, we're going to be thinking about prosodic features. So how does he use prosodic features to manage his speech, which is of course what the question is about. We're going to be looking for formulaic openings and closings, which you would expect from a speech like this. So he could be introducing himself to the audience and saying welcome, and then saying thank you at the end. And pauses and breaths are going to be very important to this speech, so he can structure it and indicate when he is moving on to a new topic. Okay, so I've just copied and pasted the lines there. So let's go through some examples. So we have examples of formulaic closings on line 30, 31, and 32, where he wraps up his speech by saying, "Thank you so much, it's a massive honor, thank you." So referring to the question, we're talking about discourse management strategies. So how is he managing this speech? So this formulaic closing is a strategy as it indicates he is wrapping up his speech, and thus he would be handing over the floor to, say, the presenter of the Logie Awards. Then we have intake of breath / pauses. So we have on line 21, which I did not show, sorry. He takes a breath or pauses, which he uses to indicate that he is changing topic. This is very common. You'll find this in a lot of spoken discourse, especially if it's pre-prepared speech. Then we have discourse particles, again, not shown on this line, but it is a good way to signal change of topic again. And we should note that there is a lack of non-fluency features that we may expect to see in a spoken text, but there is a lack of them in this speech, which hints that it was probably pre-prepared or pre-recorded, which would definitely be a management strategy when we're referring back to the question. So now this was an example of a medium scoring response from this exam. So I'm going to go through this. I'm going to say what they could have improved on and what they've already done well. So the question asked us to discuss features/strategies of spoken discourse that the speaker used to manage his text. So this student has said the use of pauses found throughout the text help Minchin manage the text by allowing him time to think about or remember his next utterance. So we know that the use of pauses, they've explained this very well, but I think they should have added the line number and example. Then they go on to say discourse particles are also found in this text, such as are in line 21, which enables him to engage in topic management by shifting the subject from his speech from one topic to another. And I think they've done this sentence really well. They've explained how it helps topic management by shifting from one topic to the other. Then they go on to say, Tim Minchin also uses openings, hello Logies, and closings, thank you, which are conventions of speeches, and give directions to his utterance by signaling when and where his speech starts and ends, hence aiding him in the managing of his speech. They've explained that really well. I think they could have used some more sophisticated meta-language and made it more concise. So let's go through what they've done well. So they have a reasonable 3 examples in this response. I think they could have had more sophisticated use of meta-language, as I mentioned before. It would have made it a higher scoring response. Using linking words to move on to your next example, that's a really good way of structuring your short answers, so using words such as furthermore and additionally. And then perhaps mentioning the importance of the audience. I think the audience for this speech is quite important in influencing his discourse strategies. So perhaps they could have mentioned that. And now we come to the summary of section A. So basically for section A, what I want you to do when you get to the exam is read through the questions and highlight the keywords in the question, because you want to make sure you're answering what they're asking. Then you're going to read through the text and identify the most salient or prominent features of the text. So first of all, you want to be thinking, is it formal, informal? What is the context, the social purpose, etc. And then depending on the question, you want to highlight the examples you wish to talk about in the text. And of course, don't forget to write the line numbers in. Use specific meta-language, and of course, you have to relate it to the text. So you can't just be talking about meta-language in a general sense. You have to relate it to the specific text they want you to analyze. And now we're just going to have a short break. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them on the Zoom chat or on Mentimeter, of course. So it's currently 11. I think we'll meet back here at about 11:05. So you can go get a drink of water, go stand up, run around for a bit, and I'll meet you back here in 5 minutes.
That was interesting, Jess.
Mhm.
We don't have this subject for HSE, like nothing like it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, nothing
Damn.
like it at all.
Damn. Wait, what did you study at school?
We only have the type of English we have at school is just like English literature.
Damn, okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Do you study this at uni, like English stuff?
No, because if you wanted to do English language at uni, it'd be linguistics.
Yeah.
Which is good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, but it's interesting that it's available for VCE.
Yeah, definitely. There's like an essay section at the end that may be
Yeah.
more English related.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that would be more up your alley, but yeah.
It's very cool.
Thank you. I know there's lots of questions on Mentimeter, so
Oh, okay, cool.
yeah. Yeah, so we'll answer them after the break, I say.
Yeah.
Then we can go on to the next section.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, guys, I think we'll get started again. So on the screen now, I have all the questions you've been asking on Mentimeter, and I think we'll just spend some time now where me and Maddie can answer your questions. So the first one was, how did you both structure your study when you were in VCE/high school? Maddie, do you want to answer this one?
Sure. I found it a bit tricky in Year 12 to just make sure that every subject was kind of receiving enough attention. So I would just try and do, because I had a bit going on after school too. So I would just try and do a couple of hours each night and just try and be consistent. It wasn't really about trying to study for like a full day or a full night. It was just enough to make sure that I was like revising the content from the day of class so I wouldn't forget it the next day. Just like literally maybe 40 minutes, 30 minutes per subject if I was doing 5 a night, just to make sure everything was receiving attention. And I found that was a lot more useful than doing like full chunks dedicated to one day, like full chunks of a day dedicated to one subject. Because you remember content, I think, well, I personally do better if you revisit it every day, whether that be studying at night and then just reading over the same notes in the morning. I think it sticks quite well.
Yeah, definitely. I really liked studying in the morning as well, actually. I found I remembered it a lot more easier for some reason. So you really just have to find when your best time is to study, basically. We'll mark that one as answered. Okay, so we have one that has 2 upvotes, so it must be good. How did you motivate yourself to study for English language when it just feels so overwhelming and you didn't want to do it? You're right, it is quite overwhelming at times, but I do really recommend, first of all, just to know the meta language, because once you have that, it becomes really easy to answer section A and section B, as you have the knowledge to analyze the text, basically. And in terms of motivating myself, I had a tutor in Year 12 for English language, so I think that was really good motivation. So I actually had to practice. Honestly, I really love the subject. I really love linguistics, which was my motivation. Yeah, I just recommend like finding the things you love about it. So English language linguistics like is all around us. Like everyone uses language. So if you just start to think about it as something, like think about it in your life and just like notice everything around you, it becomes a lot easier to start analyzing language, if that makes sense. So even if you're having a conversation with like your friends, like start going through like all the features, like what are you trying to do? What are you achieving in this conversation? And it starts becoming more natural, and therefore you don't have to like motivate yourself as much. Yeah. Which order should we do the exam in? It doesn't really matter, to be honest. I don't think. I personally did section C first. I will talk about it a bit more later in terms of like exam, like time structuring. It all depends. Like I would probably say to do the one you're most comfortable with first. So then like it gives you some motivation. So you're doing well and then answering everything else. What is the difference between conventions of a text and formatting of a text in terms of coherence? That is a good question. I'm pretty sure, I may have to get back to you, but I think conventions is like what you expect to see from something. So like, let's take like instructions, for example. You would expect to see like them laid out with like line numbers, for example, so they're in order. So it's like what society expects to see from a text. And the formatting is just how it's laid out, I think. I can get back to you though on that question, unless Maddie, you have any input.
Unfortunately, I have no input. But
That's okay.
agree, it is a great question.
Yes, I will definitely get back to that.
2 thumbs up.
I'll leave that one there. Oh, thank you. That's very kind. What's linguistics like in VCE versus uni? So VCE, obviously it's just the subject English language. Uni, so I've done, like I said before, I've done phonetics in syntax, and I've also done a subject, it was called Secret Life of Language, and basically what it did, it just covered all the subsystems. Personally, I love linguistics at uni so much more than I did in VCE. I still really loved English language, but we just have a much more in-depth look at all different subsystems at uni. My favorite subject was definitely phonetics, and we had to learn like every single sound on the IPA, for example, and like how to pronounce it, and like transcribing like made up words with all these different sounds, and it was very, very fun. Also in uni, you can choose your subjects. So if you don't like analyzing text, you can just do subjects like based on subsystems, which is what I've done. Maddie, you study English, right? But not linguistics?
Yeah, I study so like English literature. Maybe I'll see like what this essay section coming up entails. But English literature at uni is different to school. So I think like when you're analyzing a poem or when you're analyzing a book, at school there's like a lot of focus on like, is it a simile, is it a metaphor, kind of figuring out those language techniques.
Yeah.
And I found in first year uni, I was still doing a lot of that because that's what I knew. But from what I just gathered from my tutors, while like focusing on close language analysis is important, we're more concerned with like the ideas and the themes of the text.
Yeah.
Like I remember last semester I handed in this essay and I realized I hadn't even analyzed a quote yet. Just like, which was fine, like it was fine, but I'd just been reading like different type of literary theory and different kind of reviews and perspectives from critics, and that was what I used to create my argument, which is what it moves more to be.
Yeah.
Like super different. I think better.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think definitely uni is much more interesting because you can study what you want firstly, and there's so many different aspects to linguistics, so if you like it, I definitely recommend doing it at uni. We have, do you personally like the structure of the Bachelor of Science at Uni Melb? Would you recommend it? So this is not really related to linguistics, but yes, I think the structure is pretty good. With your degree, it's left quite open for a lot of the time, like up until like second year. Yeah. So you can basically choose whatever subjects, and then you can finally decide what you're going to major in, like second year. Yeah.
Really good. Yeah. Sydney Uni is really liberal in your degree too, like with what you can pick, except like I was doing commerce in first year and then I switched my degree to science.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I made that change. But the bachelor degree at Melbourne seems to have a really good structure.
Yeah.
That was like my first preference to come down to Victoria, but because of work I stayed.
Yeah. No, I definitely do recommend it. I'm happy to talk about this more at the end if we have time. So I'll leave that question there. How many practice analytical commentaries, I think that stands for, / essays, did you do before the exam? So I was quite confident in analytical commentaries, so I did a lot more essays. For my essays though, I maybe did like 7 to 8 really good ones. Based on like past exam topics and stuff. And what I did is I wrote out a full essay, and this may work for you, this may not, but I tried to memorize lots of my examples and basically how I explain the examples in each of my practice essays. So then in the exam, if I found a similar topic, I could basically use that. I found that really good. That may be not the technique for you, because if your memory is not as good, but yeah, I'll talk about more exam tips later. Do I have any tips for procrastination? Maddie, do you have any tips?
I've just battled a really big week with procrastination. But something like in another session that one of the tutors mentioned was interesting is if if you like, it still requires self-discipline, but if you plan kind of things in your day to look forward to, like around blocks of study. So say like you can be like plan to the hour if you need to, and just do like 9 to 6, maybe like 9 to 11 in the morning, you do a good session. Then 11 to 12, you go for a walk with a friend, or like you have a Zoom with a friend, and then maybe you do 2 hours more, and then you can have like a half an hour break to do something with your family. Just kind of planning your time like that, I think would work quite well. So, you know, like you've got things to look forward to after your big study set.
Definitely. Yeah, I think like scheduling in fun stuff is probably just as important as scheduling in what you need to achieve for the day. So then what I do, I write a list of everything I need to do for the day, like with little boxes so I can tick them off. And even if it's like the tiniest little task, I'll still write it down because it makes me feel a lot better about myself once I've achieved that. So this question is, if I didn't do well in my SACs, is it too late? No, it is absolutely not too late. The exam is worth quite a lot. I think it's worth like 50%. It may have changed this year with the updated study design, I'm not sure, but I think it's about 50%. And I can tell you from my experience, we had like maybe like 8 SACs overall. And in some of them, I was getting like 50 or 60%. Which isn't too great for, I wanted to achieve a lot higher. But in the end, I just studied really hard for the exam, and it turned out the subject was actually my best subject. So yes, it's definitely not too late. Because the exam is worth quite a lot, you can definitely increase your mark. This question, do people still always talk about ATAR at uni? The answer is no. Like, literally, it's never mentioned again, so there's no need to worry. Like, once you're into your course, it doesn't matter how you got there. It's just a fresh start. What is me and Maddie's single best study tip to remember all these things? So for English language in particular, I think with the meta language, I say that's probably the hardest thing to remember. Make a table. I do have a table template, which I'll give to you later. And basically make like a section that's like, do I know this? And you can tick it if you do. If you don't, there's like a definition section. So basically it's just rote learning for the meta language. And for everything else, so the best study tip to remember is just practice. I know everyone says that, but it really is. So I like to talk things out loud. I might talk with like my family or my friend and explain a concept, and I find that really helps me. And
it seems like with the meta language, there's a lot to learn. Like there's a lot of different things that you can write about. So if like the rote learning process all at once seems a bit daunting, what you guys could do is probably just like write on a piece of paper, like have a whole list of all the meta language features. And then like when you're doing practice exams or just practicing, you're looking at the paper, and slowly after maybe a couple of practices, what is on the page like will just become super familiar just from visually looking at it, rather than rote learning it and trying to do a whole block of memorizing, which I think would be quite overwhelming. And then like different types of what Jess said was all good. I completely agree.
Thanks, Maddie. Yeah, definitely. So like the more you practice, the more familiar you're going to get with it. But with English language, I know they give you like a really long list of meta language, but honestly, like some is way more important than the others. And a good way to like determine which one is more important is to go through past exams. So you can find them on the VCAR website, like near the study design and all that. And you'll find that lots of the questions are quite similar each year. Like, for example, there's always one on coherence or cohesion. So it's really important to know them. There might be something about like the identity of the speaker. So like you have to talk about lots of features that reflect the identity. And there's often a question about like register or social purpose. So there are very common things that come up. And I would definitely prioritize learning those more over like random meta language. Yeah. And we'll come back to those two questions. So let's go back to the PowerPoint now. Keep asking questions. We'll have another question time at the end, I would say. And can everyone see the PowerPoint now? Is that all good?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So now we're going to go on to content block 2. So we're going to be talking about the analytical commentary and the essay. So for the analytical commentary, we're going to cover how to write an analysis plan, how to structure your analysis, and we're going to again look at past exams, see what people struggle with, and how to maximize your marks. So when I was in year 12, I think this was a really important acronym. You may have learned it. I'm not sure if they teach it at lots of schools, but it's Mr. Crafts, and it's basically a good acronym that allows you to remember all the elements of a text that you should be thinking about in terms of your analysis. So it stands for, the M stands for mode. So that's whether the text is spoken or written. Then you have the first R, which is for a register. So again, that's like whether it's an informal or formal text. Then you have the context. And now there's both cultural and situational context. They are different. It's very important to talk about these in all, any text you're going to analyze. I'll go into that further later. The second R is for the role of the speaker. So that's basically, what is the speaker doing there? Like, are they giving a speech? Are they trying to explain something? A stands for the audience. So that's like, could be if it's like a live talk show, it could be performed in front of a live audience, or whether it's just a conversation between two friends, the audience, there's going to be no audience, so therefore it's not going to be very important. F is the function. This is more the social purpose. I think a few years ago, they changed the study design from function to social purpose. I think something like that happened. So basically, what is the text trying to achieve? Like, what is the purpose of the text? Then we have T, which is text type. So I think that's just what the type of text is. Honestly, it's not too important. And semantic fields. So where are all the lexemes? Like, what's the field of the lexemes? Okay, so obviously, when you have your text, you want to skim through the text and like try and pick out all these features so you can refer to them in your analysis. But you do have to keep in mind that some are way more important than others. So I have an example here. So the audience is likely to be far more important, like in a speech, like a live speech or a performance, because they are being like interacted with. But it is not going to be important like between a two-person conversation, unless of course someone is listening in, and that is important. Okay, so this is what VCAR wants you to do for exam section B. So in your response, what you need to do is you're expected to demonstrate your ability to use relevant descriptive and metalinguistic tools. So again, meta-language comes up there. Super important to know your meta-language, and you need to use your meta-language to describe or analyze the text. Demonstrate familiarity with the topics of Unit 3, language variation and social purpose, and the topics of Unit 4, language variation and identity. So again, the text could be like anything. It could be spoken or written, informal and formal, and you just need to use all your meta-language you've learnt from these two units. And so this is the question that will come up on the exam. It's the same every year, so I've just copied and pasted it. It's worth 30 marks. So it says, write an analytical commentary on the language features of text 2. In your response, you have to comment on contextual factors affecting / surrounding the text, the social purpose and register of the text, stylistic and discourse features of the text. And of course, you always have to refer to two subsystems. This is very necessary. If you don't, you will not be able to achieve full marks, of course. So here on the slide, I've underlined the really important things that VCAR wants you to do. So of course, the contextual factors, that's all about the context. So we have like cultural context and situational context. The social purpose and register, these are two very important aspects of text. You should always be talking about these. It's a good idea to base your paragraphs, for example, around the social purposes of the text and even the register. and stylistic and discourse features. I will go through some stylistic features soon. Okay, so now we're going to go through how to write an analysis plan. So of course, I've got a little reminder up here of what we need to keep in mind. So things like social purpose and register. So what you want to do is first, I want you to identify Mr. Crafts. So that's that acronym we talked about before. And really, you'll be given a context paragraph, just like we did in section A. So it's basically a little paragraph explaining what the text is going to be about. And most of the time, you should be able to identify all the Mr. Crafts, or if not all of them, most of them, all the Mr. Crafts elements just from that context paragraph. If you need further evidence, you should just skim read the text. And then what you're going to do is decide whether you want to base your paragraphs on subsystems or the most salient social purposes / features of the text. So I know I did English language units 1 and 2. I know lots of schools don't offer that, but basically back in the day, we learned how to write our analysis in terms of subsystems. So that's like talking about like the syntax, for example, and then talking about like the semantics. But then we went on to instead using topic sentences based on the social purposes of the text. So you'll often find the text might have like 1 or 2 social purposes. And also the register might be really important. So I do recommend basing your paragraphs on the social purposes and other features rather than the subsystems. So number 3 is to then go through the text, and then you're going to highlight key examples that reflect the topic of each paragraph. Then you're going to note down how it reflects an aspect of the text. So when I say aspect, I mean in Mr. Craft's element. So it could reflect like the register. So I have an example. So we have sophisticated lexis being used reflects the formal register of the text and hence supports the speaker's purpose to ... And then we have to write. So for in terms of timing for the analysis, I would leave about 5 minutes to plan. If you're really quick at planning, even better. And then you have about 40 minutes to write. Okay. So let's look at structuring your paragraphs and let's look at an example. So I just have a little note there up the top again about the subsystem versus prominent aspects of the text, which one you want to base your paragraphs on. Now, for these examples, I'm going to be basing the paragraphs on the social purposes and register of the text, as I think that's a much better way to base your analytical commentaries. I know if you have just learnt the subsystem way, which some schools may have taught, that's okay. You can give it a go trying to base it on like the social purpose and register way. I'll explain that now. If you feel like that will work for you, definitely recommend doing that for the exam. So what I've done here is I've just taken the context paragraph from the 2019 exam from section B. And what we're going to do is we're just going to identify the Mr. Crafts elements from just this context paragraph without even reading the text. So the context paragraph goes, the following text is from an afternoon radio program on Fox FM, which is broadcast on weekdays between 4:30 p.m. and 6:30. And so we can start thinking about seeing its broadcast between those times. We can start thinking that that's probably aimed at people coming home from work. Perhaps they're driving home in their car, listening in. Then we have the show is hosted by Dave Hughes and Kate Langbroek. Also featured are the radio station's production assistant Jack and a phone call from Hughes' wife Holly. The text is taken from the opening sequence of the program on Friday, 15th February 2019. In the program, Hughesy and Kate discuss diet soft drinks. So this is a really good context paragraph. We can pretty much identify all the Mr. Crafts elements from this. So I've just done them here. So for M, which was the mode, we know it's going to be spoken because it's a radio program. Then we have R, which is the register. Without reading the text, we probably can't confirm this yet, but I've identified that because Dave Hughes, he goes by his nickname. it seems to say that he goes by a nickname, suggesting that there's a more like casual tone to this radio program. So I'm going to guess that it's an informal register. Then we have the context. So we know it's in a live studio, being broadcast live to whoever's listening in. And it seems like it's a regular talk show. We can't see too much more without reading the text. So we, in terms of cultural context, we can just start to think, what would we expect to see from a talk show like this? Like, it could just be for entertainment. They could be talking about something that happened lately. Then we have the role of the speaker. And that is, of course, to entertain and gain viewers. Pretty self-explanatory. It's because it's a radio program and they want to entertain. Then we have the audience. So we know it's going to be a live audience, unless, of course, it was a pre-recorded radio, but I believe it was broadcast live. The function or social purpose. Of course, number one, entertainment, and we want to build rapport with the audience. So that could be a secondary social purpose, but it does come under the entertainment. The text type is just a dialogue, I said, or a radio program dialogue. And the semantic field, so we've been told that they're discussing diet soft drinks, but it is likely they also are going to be talking about random things that are in an attempt to entertain their audience. So first of all, when you get your context paragraph, I want you to read through it, and then I want you to start thinking, like, what do your intuitions tell you? So we do know that it's a radio program already, so we can tell that they want to gain viewers. Like, they do not want to lose viewers, of course, so we know they're going to try to be entertaining in order to engage their audience. We will know that the host will attempt to build a sort of persona that appeal to their audience. For example, we have Husey. So he likes to be referred to by his nickname, it seems, like building his funny persona. The topic is likely to be an entertaining one, unless, of course, it was like a news radio program, like an informative program. Therefore, based on these intuitions, we can decide which Mr. Craft's elements that we want to base our paragraphs on, keeping in mind that VCAR wants you to talk about social purpose and register, but we can also choose another Mr. Craft's elements if we think it's important. So I've decided that the informal / entertaining register is going to be a very important thing to talk about. I've also decided that the social purpose, which is to entertain and gain an audience, is going to be very important. And of course, like a secondary social purpose, which is appealing to the audience or building rapport with the audience, despite them not being there. So the radio hosts would try to interact with their audience, not by asking questions, of course, because they're not there, but more just like making them laugh with them. So I've just copied and pasted those there. And now, of course, we have to introduce subsystems. You definitely have to talk about subsystems. VCAR says so in the instructions for section B. So I've identified some easy subsystems that I think would be very easy to talk about in terms of this spoken text that we've received. So of course, if you have a spoken text, you're going to be immediately thinking about phonetics and phonology, because that's all about sounds. You're not going to get much phonetics in a written text. It's just not going to be as likely. So with the spoken text, the prosodic features are definitely going to be important, and they're going to be used to draw attention to things, like emphasize something, and of course like build rapport and grab the audience's attention, which is all helping the social purpose. Then we have lexicology and semantics. Because we think it's going to be an informal text, there's likely to be colloquial terms and informal language used, which of course adds to the informal register, which is an easy way to make the audience feel relaxed. If they were using a very formal tone, the audience is not going to relate as much, as we know that the audience is likely to be people coming home from work, given the time of the broadcast. Then we have discourse. Discourse, I think you should always be talking about discourse no matter what the text is. So you're going to be talking about coherence and cohesion. And of course, it is essential to the flow of the conversation, which is helping it achieve, helping the show be successful. Okay, so now we can see what our paragraphs are going to look like. So first, for your analytical commentary, you're going to have a context paragraph. So this is where you introduce the text and the speakers or writers. So your very first sentence can simply be a brief overview of the text, explaining what it's talking about and who is the speaker / writer. And then what I want you to do, of course, is covering Mr. Craft's elements as best as you can, only the most important ones. You need to explain these about the text, specifically focusing on the register and social purpose, because VCAR specifically gives you instructions to do this. Of course, you have to talk about the topics you're going to talk about later as well. So then we have our paragraph 1. So we decided that we were going to talk about social purpose. So the first sentence can be something about the social purpose of the text is aided through the ... and you then go on to talk about like how the informal register is aiding the purpose of adding humor. So the social purpose we've identified, was entertaining and building rapport. And this is backed up by the informal register. As one, it does add humor and it makes the audiences feel more relaxed, thus building rapport with them. Then we have the subsystem we're going to talk about in this paragraph is lexicology and semantics. So for example, you could talk about like colloquial language used or informal lexemes that reflect the informal register. So see what I've done there? I've like introduced what the social purpose is. I've talked about how it is backed up by the register. And then I've used examples from subsystems that reflect this informal register. Then we have paragraph 2. Now, I think that prosodics is very important to talk about in a spoken text, so we'll definitely have a paragraph on prosodics. And the prosodics used, we know it's going to aid the primary and secondary social purpose, which was entertaining and like appealing to the audience by drawing the audience's attention to more serious topics or indicating when they should laugh. So they can use like emphasis on certain words or like vocal effects like laughter. And then we have the subsystem, of course, will be phonetics and phonology. So there we've already covered 2 subsystems, but we still have our third paragraph, which was the flow of the conversation, which is coherence. And it's going to be a successful radio show if it is coherent. So the audience wants to be able to follow along very easily. So coherence and cohesion are employed to create a smooth conversation. So this will allow the audience to follow along easily, which hence aids the social purpose. And the subsystem we're talking about here is discourse. So see here how I've woven the social purpose through that, backed up by the subsystem. And that's it. So once you've identified all the important elements and the subsystem that can back it up, as long as you're weaving through social purpose and register, that is all you have to do for your analytical commentary. Now we just have a quick example from a student. This is what they wrote. I believe it was a medium to high scoring response. So I'll read through it. So this was in response to the context paragraph that we were given before, so about the talk show. So for their context paragraph, this student has said, "This informal conversation takes place on the radio program Fox FM. It has the function of entertaining and a secondary function of informing its audience, which is the general public coming home from work. It also has the social purpose of building rapport with the interlocutors and reducing social distance between the listeners." So basically what they've identified is the social purposes, which they've identified a primary and a secondary social purpose of entertaining and informing the audience. They've identified that the audience is, in fact, the general public coming home from work, which is what we suspected before. They've identified another social purpose of building rapport between the speakers themselves and, of course, reducing social distance between the listeners. So they've identified the social purposes and the audience, and, of course, the register. They say in the very first line, this informal conversation. Then for paragraph 2, they're talking about prosodic features, which was one of our paragraphs we planned. So a key element of the conversation is the prosodic features used. Emphatic stress is utilized to emphasize, as in what a week on line 5, highlighting that the week has been long and tiresome, potentially causing the listener to relate. So this is really good. What they've started off with a sentence telling us what they're going to talk about in this paragraph, which is prosodic features. Then they've gone on to use an example of emphatic stress, which of course is a prosodic feature, which is utilized to emphasize like certain lines, which they've talked about, which then is, they talk about how it's causing the listener to relate to the speakers, which is achieving a social purpose. I think they could have expanded on this a bit more by saying that it aids the social purpose. They could have just tagged that in at the end of that sentence. Then they say it is also used to incite humor, such as in Linguistic Geniuses, line 8, to imply sarcasm to the obvious joke. The use of falling pitch on lines 30, 33, and 34 show that Husey is being serious and no longer joking around, which aids to the secondary function to inform the audience about the dangers of diet soft drinks. Yep, so they've done that really well. They're talking about all different prosodic features and talking about the different functions and social purposes they've identified of the text. So what they've done well is they have good use of meta-language relating to prosodics. I would have said another example. It was quite a short paragraph, so another example may have been nice. And like I said, linking the prosodic features to the main Mr. Craft's elements, such as social purpose, would have made this a higher scoring response. So instead of just explaining your example, explain why the example reflects a certain aspect of, for example, the social purpose. So let's look at some tips from examiners from past exams. So I've simply just gone through examiner reports on VCA, and these are all tips about section B. Some of them are pretty similar, so I'll just read through them quickly. So the examiners say that you have to select the prominent features of the text for analysis in section B. So this is basically, you have to choose the most prominent aspects of Mr. Craft's elements, which is what I've been talking about. And they tell students to refine the structure by putting context, purpose, and register in the introductory paragraph, thus establishing a framework for the analysis. So this is telling us how important it is to talk about the context, so both cultural and situational, the purpose and the register in our very first paragraph, because then we can weave these through in our other paragraphs. They say to beware of simply listing features. Remember to identify, exemplify, and explain the link to context and purpose. Yep, so like I said before, in the example, they were just listing features sometimes without explaining how this relates to the social purpose or aids the social purpose. So it's very important to do that. This one's, and then the last one we have here is just remember line numbers. So this is the average mark from an exam for section B. So we can see that it's 8.8 out of 15. And this is about the average mark of all past exams for section B. So it's not great, it's about 50%. But even if you up your marks by like 2 to 3 marks or even 4 marks, you're already putting yourself in about the top 20% of students. So the things that are going to get you the maximum amount of marks possible, of course, is accurate and sophisticated meta-language, appropriate discussion of the register, social purpose, and context of the text, and of course, discussing and analyzing examples that reflect this specific text. So don't be vague, you have to really relate it to the text you've been given. Okay, so I'm just going to go through some brief stylistic features. So for section B, VCA specifically mentions you have to talk about stylistic features. So that includes like all the different types of patterning. So we have phonological patterning, lexicological, I cannot pronounce that word, sorry, patterning, semantic patterning, and like syntactic patterning. So I'll just briefly go through those. We have phonological patterning. So you could talk about, this would come under like the phonetic subsystem, which would be a subsystem you can tick off in your analysis. So it's basically just the sound patterns created by someone, and like with rhythmic patterns created by the overlay of syllable stress. And they can be used to grab the attention of the audience. So we have an example. Alliteration is an example of phonological patterning, and it's a type of sound pattern that involves the use of identical consonants or consonant clusters at the beginning of words. We also have the example of rhyme, which is a combination of assonance and either consonants and alliteration. So I'm not going to go through all the phonological patterning, but you can find it on the VCAR meta-language table, and it's just really important that you know these and know a few examples so you can talk about it if it comes up in your text. Syntactic patterning, this is quite an important one. I do remember, I think it's come up on a past exam in section A. They asked you to talk about syntactic patterning specifically. So we'll go through some examples. So some examples of syntactic patterning is like listing or parallelism. So listing, I'll go through parallelism, sorry. It's like the repetition of a grammatical structure, and you just change a few words. So you often see it in like a motivational speech, for example. Yeah, so parallelism can emphasize similarities or differences between each grammatical sequence in the overall construction. So once again, it's just important to know these. There is a long list on VCAR that you can find. And we have semantic patterning, so we have things like metaphors and similes, personification, puns, synonymy. Yep, so now we're going to go on to section C. I think we'll just have a short break quickly. So it's 11:47 at the moment. We'll have another 5-minute break just because section C will be a bit hard again. Feel free to keep asking questions on Mentimeter. So go get a drink of water, stand up again, and I'll see you in 5 minutes. Okay, I think we'll get started again. So now we're on to section C, which is the essay. Like I said before, I know lots of people find this section very scary, but I will try and explain to you a really good way to work through it so you don't have to stress in the exam. So what we're going to cover in this section is 1, choosing the right topic. Number 2, we're going to look at how to write an essay plan. And 3, we're going to look at, of course, the past exams and what people have struggled with. So for the essay, these are the instructions from VCAR. So in section C, you were required to respond to one of the questions. And in your response, what you have to do is you have to demonstrate your ability to use relevant descriptive and metalinguistic tools. So you should recognize that sentence from section B as well. So it's just the same. And section C, you now have to demonstrate familiarity with the topics in Unit 3 and Unit 4. And you have to refer to the stimulus material provided. And it's worth 30 marks. So here, this is what you'll see in the exam. So you have up the top, it will be the question number, and you'll have 3 choices. So there'll be 3 pages looking like this. And basically you have the stimulus, which will be a series of examples that VCAR have provided to you that you can use in your essay. And of course, remembering that you also have to use your own examples. And then down the bottom, what you have is like the topic or the prompt. So we can see the topic there. It's a bit small, but it's Australian English is always enriched by the non-standard English varieties operating in contemporary Australian society. Then it always tells you to discuss, referring to at least 2 subsystems. So again, we have to make sure we're covering our subsystems in our response. So first of all, I'm going to go through how to choose a question. So you should know that you have 3 options, and you should really be choosing the one you're most comfortable and familiar with. And of course, one that you have contemporary media examples in mind for that are reflective of that topic. So this is an example from the 2019 exam. So I've just copied and pasted the 3 prompts that you got to decide from. Obviously, the stimulus I have not put on would take up too much of the screen. So basically the first prompt says, Australian English is always enriched by the non-standard English varieties operating in contemporary Australian society. So this one you'd be just talking about all the different like ethnolex dialects you see around Australia and how that enriches Australian English. The second prompt is about some aspects of situational and cultural context have greater influence over an individual's language choices than others. Is this true in the context of contemporary Australian society? So this one, you'd really have to have a solid understanding of situational versus cultural context and the influence that it has on someone's language choices. And then you'd have to use examples that you have and the stimulus provided and form this into an essay. Then the last one we have is formal language is used mainly to clarify meaning, but it can also be used to obfuscate. I really liked topics like these in year 12. I did lots of practice essays on that and just hoped for the best that it came up in the exam, which it did for me, which was really good. And so we just need to keep in mind that this topic, the topic of the questions, is always drawn from an area of study from units 3 or 4. And after this, I'm going to go through various topics that it could be from units 3 and 4, highlighting ones that come up a lot. And it always requires you to refer to at least 2 subsystems, so we always need to keep that in mind. So the question is, how do you choose your essay topic? And of course, like, I can't tell you, I don't know which ones you're good at and which ones you are not quite familiar with, but definitely choose the one you're most comfortable with. I do recommend for study, maybe have like 3 to 4 topics that you know really well that you know are going to come up. At least one of them will come up on the exam. If you look through past exams, there's very common themes that you can work out the topics are going to be based around. And then when you are in the exam, what I recommend to do is to scan through each question first, like the prompts more specifically, and then if you like the look of one, go through the stimulus. And then if ideas start forming in your head, if you can see yourself bringing in your own contemporary media examples you have, then you probably have chosen the right topic. Let's go through an essay plan now. So this is going to be similar to how I did for the analysis plan. And of course, keeping in mind up here, we always have to have 2 subsystems we're talking about, using meta-language, sophisticated and accurate meta-language. And I really want you to think about, like, why is language so important? Like, why does language reflect our identities when you're talking about essays, when you're writing your essay, sorry. So first of all, I want you to identify the question that you wish to discuss and then highlight the keywords in that question. So if it's about like formal language, you should highlight formal language, and like obfuscating, highlight that word. Then you're going to go through and write down the media examples and stimulus examples that you are going to include. So with the stimulus, whether that just be like highlighting the ones and the specific words that you want to use, and just jot down the media examples, say next to the stimulus on the exam paper. Then I want you to decide on about three topic sentences. Underneath, what I want you to do is just expand on which examples you will use, and then write a quick sentence on how they reflect what you are discussing. So you'll have topic sentence, example, and then how that example reflects your topic sentence. Then, of course, you need to write. Now with timing, it's about the same as the analysis, I would say. I would usually leave a little bit more time for the essay. So if you can get through section A and section B more quickly, the essay is probably definitely the hardest part of the exam, in my opinion. So the more time, the better. Okay, so let's look at an example. So with this example, this is in response to the third prompt I showed before, which was formal language is used mainly to clarify meaning, but it can also be used to obfuscate, refer to two subsystems. And now on the examination reports from 2019, I have simply copied and pasted the intro from a high scoring response. And I'll go through that now, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it up into the parts where it's like the topic it's talking about, and it's 3 paragraphs, which I will show on the next slide. So basically what I've done is highlighted the different sections. So here in the green, we have formal language is used in contemporary Australian society to achieve a range of social purposes. So this is laying out what they're going to talk about in their essay. Then in the yellow, they've said it is most well known for its ability to either promote or threaten social harmony. So there they're just expanding on formal language a bit and what it is and what it can do in society, basically. And then they have their 3 topics that they're going to talk about in their paragraphs. So in the purple, they've said formal language used to clarify meaning is part of promoting social harmony, and this can be achieved by jargon. So remembering jargon is like specific language. Say you can have like medical jargon. It's like very specific terms. So basically what I can see they're going to talk about in this paragraph is how formal language or jargon in particular can be used in some situations to clarify a meaning, which will actually promote social harmony in this case if the meaning is being clarified rather than obfuscated. Then the second paragraph is it can also be used to obfuscate and manipulate, which likely leads to threats to social cohesion. So this is going on the opposite side now. So they're basically saying formal language can be used to make like the meaning really unclear and therefore make people confused and like manipulate people, which of course would threaten social harmony or cohesion. And then their last statement or paragraph is, however, it cannot be concluded that formal language is mainly used to clarify meanings, as it also holds other common purposes such as promoting inclusivity or alienating others. So again, they're just talking about different aspects to formal language and what it can achieve in society. So what was really good about this high scoring response? So they had 3 clear topic sentences, so we know what their essay is going to be about. They provided a solid introduction to the topic with really good use of meta-language, so they had all the terms. So I'll just go back. So they had things like formal language and social purpose and like jargon and social harmony, obfuscating, etc. And of course, they directly addressed the topic. So they didn't make the topic into their own thing and like worded it differently. They're directly addressing what the topic wants them to talk about. And so now we're going to look at the average mark for essays in past exams. And again, we can see this isn't too good. So 8.4 out of 15 for this past exam for the essay, which is very similar to the analytical commentary. So you can see that students do quite struggle getting in the higher range marks, but even if you get like 3 to 4 marks above the average, you're already putting yourself in like the top 15 to 20%, which is great. And of course, the things that are going to get you the maximum amount of marks possible is once again, accurate and sophisticated meta-language. Of course, for the essay, you really have to directly address the topic question. So you can't really make it your own. You have to really address what it is. Like, yeah, you can't make it your own, basically. Discussing examples that strongly reflect or show examples of the topic you were discussing. So drawing in from media examples and the stimulus examples that reflect the topic. And always just focusing on language and like why we use language and what is language, like how does it reflect society, basically. Okay, and so now I'm just going to go through, I won't read through all of these, just the ones I've highlighted in red, but some Unit 3 and 4 topics that I think will come up in the essay prompts a lot. So there's often one on like the standard or non-standard Englishes. So I've highlighted up the top the role of the standard and non-standard English in creating formal and informal text. So lots of prompts may draw like inspiration from the standards. So it's really good to have a solid understanding of what the standard is, where it's used, etc. And then a bit down, it's talking about stylistic features. So phonological patterning, syntactic patterning, morphological patterning, and lexical choice and semantic patterning. So once again, this is more related to the analytical commentary, I would say, but they can test you on these. It's very important to know which ones and what aspects come under which. Then we have the use of informal language for various social purposes, including encouraging intimacy, so solidarity and equality, maintaining and challenging positive and negative face needs, promoting linguistic innovation, and supporting in-group membership. So you will find that lots of essay prompts draw on all these social purposes, actually. They could be talking about like positive and negative face needs. I know I've seen a prompt like that before. And like promoting in-group membership is a big one. And then some more Unit 3 topics. So just down the bottom in red, again, I've highlighted more social purposes that you would have learnt. So we have challenging positive and negative face needs, like I said before, reinforcing social distance and authority, establishing expertise, promoting social harmony, negotiating social taboos and building rapport, clarifying, manipulating, and obfuscating. So again, we saw one before already about obfuscating, formal language being used to obfuscate. But the prompts in Section C can be drawn from any of these social purposes. And now let's go on to Unit 4. So again, states the role of standard and non-standard. So Unit 4 we know is all about identity. So there may be a topic in Section C about Australian identities and how they are constructed and reflected. You may get a question about the characteristics of Australian English in contrast to other Englishes. Language variation and identity is a big topic in Unit 4, of course, and you may get a topic in Section C about identity. I know generally most years there is one about identity, so if you like talking about that, I would definitely recommend practicing that a lot. And then of course, how Australian English varies according to culture, including Aboriginal English and ethnolex. And then a big one again is attitudes. So like attitudes within society to different varieties of Australian English. And you should know prescriptivism versus descriptivism, the difference between them, and the various attitudes. And some more topics. So we have social and personal variation in language according to factors such as age, gender, occupation, interest, aspirations, and education. Then we have features of language that contribute to a sense of individual identity and group membership. So again, that's all about identity, like the individual's identity, a group identity, or like a social identity. And then down the bottom, we have overt and covert norms. So you should know what these mean and like how people draw on linguistic repertoire to gain power and prestige, including exploiting these norms. Okay, this was going to be the break, but we just had it before, so I'll keep going. So now I'm going to talk about finding media examples. So we know that media examples are very important to Section C. You won't achieve full marks at all if you don't have your own contemporary media examples. And what it means by contemporary is they must be, I think, from the last year. I know my teacher said from about September of the previous year up until now, will count for a contemporary media example. Basically, you're looking for language use in Australia that you can talk about and gather examples from to talk about in these essay topics. So how to find these? Of course, go to Google. Then you go into Google, like the topic you're looking for. So for example, if you're looking for like a negative language, so I've got an example for racial slurs, and then at the end you add Australia and news, and then you go through the news articles. And of course, because it's in Australia, there is a lot of racism, and I found many, many articles as I put down below, and that was just after a quick search. And it's basically all about someone using like a racist slur, and then you can talk about the media's response to that and how that reflects values held by society. And these are some easy topics to find contemporary media examples from. So formal language. Literally, there's going to be so many examples of formal language lately. Any speech given by like a politician, or Dan Andrews, of course, giving his reports on COVID, there's going to be lots of formal language examples. You could look at some like motivational speeches, for example. If you want lots of examples of like syntactic patterning, look at more pre-prepared speeches. Racial slurs. Google racism in Australia, and you are bound to find a person that has been called out by the media for using offensive language. It happens really often. And then we have political correctness. So this is also a topic that may come up in section C. I know it's come up in a few past exams, and I really like talking about this topic. So simply Google political correctness in Australia and go through the news. And then you'll find someone commenting on like people being too politically correct. And you can talk about how our language is actually just evolving to become more inclusive. And these people are often holding attitudes like prescriptive attitudes. Okay, so now I'm going to go through some tips for the exam. So for the exam itself, I say you should really try and complete section A as quickly as possible. I think section A is definitely the easiest. If you spend maybe 20-25 minutes on section A, that will leave a lot of time for section B and C. For section B and C, definitely write a plan, or at least know where you're going. So that would just be like jotting down like your topic sentences. Without a plan, you're going to get really lost and confused. You may double up on examples, and that will just lead to disaster. And of course, you have to remember that each text is different. So remember that you have to analyze the specific text. So you have to just really relax and like really like skim read, of course, but really try and analyze what the text is saying to you, like this text in particular. And of course, the examiners don't want a vague, non-specific essay/analysis about language because they want you to relate it to the text. And just some study tips in general. Of course, you can ask me questions soon and I'll give you more study tips. But read the meta-language list on the study design. Revise applying ones, so some meta-language that you are unsure of to actual practice exams. So create a table or use the one that I've provided you. You can find through Skyline. And of course, just practice, practice, practice. And just like try and enjoy the subject. English language, it's all about linguistics. And it's just a huge part of our life when you really think about it. So yeah, you should really try and enjoy it. And this is for in terms of timing for the exam. So like I said, for section A, you want to be spending about 20 to 25 minutes on this section. The less the better, because then you have more time for section B and C. Section B and C, 5-minute plan, 40 minutes write. Like the quicker you do your plan, the more time for writing, of course. And then with this timing, you'll have like maybe 5 to 10 minutes to proofread your responses. Probably definitely important to do that just in case you've made any big mistakes, you can quickly cross them out. Before we go to that, we're going to go back to Mentimeter now, and I'm going, me and Maddie can answer all your questions. So I'll just share my screen to Mentimeter. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so keep sending through questions if you have them, and I'll start answering some that haven't been answered. Okay, so we have a question and it goes, can you write your plan for the analytical commentary in the answer space of the analytical commentary section, or do we write it on a separate paper sections? So what I would do for the plan, I'd probably just write it on the text itself. So I'm pretty sure you'll get the text as like a removable few pages on the exam, and then you can just scribble on that rather than on the answer space. You want to leave that nice and clear. Do we have to mention what subsystem we get features from? Or is it implied when we analyze the feature, like prosodics coming from phonology? Personally, I don't think you should have to mention the specific subsystem. Like if you're talking about, for example, like syntactic patterning, that obviously comes from syntax. So no, I don't think it's necessary. Maybe for something more vague, I don't have an example right now, but only if you think that the examiners will have no idea what you're talking about, but they will know which subsystem comes from which. And how many examples of features should we include in each paragraph? I'm going to assume, I'm not sure which one this was for, whether it was for the analytical commentary or the essay. For the analytical commentary, maybe like 3 to 4 examples in each paragraph. Try and aim for 3 always. The more the better. Like it depends how much time you have to write, really. And in terms of the essay, obviously there's not going to be as many examples to talk about. I think it's more about explaining what the topic is and like demonstrating your knowledge of the topic. I probably had about 2 examples per paragraph for the essay and put more in if I could. So maybe like 1 media example per paragraph, and then like 1 to 2 stimulus examples per paragraph for the essay. We have the question, how in depth do you have to go when explaining the context of your contemporary evidence? Not too in depth. If it's quite a popular example, the examiners will probably have some background, but probably I would just give a brief overview of the person who said something, where it occurred, and what its effect was, like in terms of the media's response, if it had a response, or like why it was demonstrating this use of language. Okay, so now we can go back to this question. Once again, I'm pretty sure conventions is just what you want to what you expect from a thing. So like from a blog post we talked about earlier, we expect to see like paragraphs and links, and the formatting is just how it's laid out. So I think I'll leave it as that. I really doubt that the exam is going to make you tell the difference between the two. And now we can talk more about uni. So keep sending questions, whether they're related to uni or to linguistics in general. Me and Maddie can talk about. And of course, keep sending questions if you have any about English language. So I'll talk more about uni. So yeah, the Bachelor of Science. So I major in physics, but basically up until about a few months ago, I was doing like chemistry. I was doing like linguistic subjects as well and maths. So I really had the option to go into many different majors, but I've just chosen physics now in my 2nd year. So it is quite a good structure. Yeah, it really leaves options open, and yeah, you can do all the electives you want. I really like how I can do linguistic subjects each semester, which is really good because I have the option to do that. We've got a new question. Is it better to have rare/niche examples for your essays or common ones? Probably a mix of both. So the more common they are, like the examiner's going to know and expect them, which is really good. But as long as your like rare examples still reflect the language, that is good. The examiners, if they think you're lying or have made up an example, that I don't know, I think they check it. But if not, yeah, just a mix of both, I'd say, is really good. Does anyone have any more questions? Maddie, did you have any more tips or exam tips?
Just thinking, if anyone has questions about New South Wales, I can answer them. I'm just thinking maybe like when the holidays, because school's on a break now, isn't it? Like coming up to ages before you have your final exams.
Yeah.
I think like after you do those school assessments, maybe like because you've ultimately learnt everything that you require for the VCE exam. Is that right? So it might be like you might find it a bit difficult to figure out a plan of what you want to gain in this period of time before the exam, considering like you've gone over the content at school. And then it might feel like, I know for me it was difficult to plan like what I was going to do each day because it's just like a lot of revision. Maybe like depending on how long it is, if it was like 4 weeks, in the first week you could, for example, like with the meta language, just write it out and you don't have to expect yourself to memorize it. But if you practice every day, it will become so much more familiar to you that you won't have to have your notes with you when you're doing, like you can tell yourself that you don't want to have notes with you when you do practice for the last week or like the last 2 weeks. And then by the time the exam comes around, you'll just feel like super confident, and that will help with like nerves too, I think.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
like you can just write so much faster and you won't feel stressed about like, oh, how much does my hand hurt?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that, Maddie. We just have a bit of time, so I might go back to the PowerPoint and I'll go through some more exam tips. And I'm just going to talk about my experience with the exam and like what I did going up, like studying up to the exam. So then you guys can apply these tips so you can do really well. So before the exam, I think it was one of my last exams. So I had quite a few exams before that. But basically, I would start, instead of doing a full exam, I would just do separate sections. So I'd like, for example, I'd just choose like a section A example from a past exam, and I'd just practice doing that. So what I'd do, I'd go through all the steps. I'd like highlight what the question is asking me, quickly analyze the text, highlight the examples, and practice writing responses. And then I'd either get my teacher or a tutor to like look through this and make sure I've done everything correctly, and try and get the maximum amount of marks possible. Again, section A, it was a really easy section. For me, I found it, and it's quite a good section to like get lots of marks if you're worried about section B and C, because all you have to do for section A, of course, is just answer the question. For section B, again, I just thought of it as like basically section A combined. So you're just taking like major aspects of the text and like analyzing them. For practice for section B, I think I just went through, again, just past exams, and what I'd do is as quickly as possible, I would analyze the text, quickly write down the Mr. Crafts elements and my examples, and then practice writing that out. For section C, I went about this a bit differently, like I mentioned before. I did more of like a remembering the essay sort of approach. Again, probably not the best approach depending on like how your brain works, but I chose some topics. So like I said, I really liked like topics about formal language, like used to either clarify or obfuscate meaning. I really like those topics, and also ones about like political correctness. And basically, I just made sure I was really good at these topics, pretty much guaranteed they were going to come up on the exam because they have every year, at least one of the prompts. I also focused a lot on identity because there's always a prompt based around identity. And there's also going to be lots of questions. And yeah, so for media examples, I collected them throughout the year, but it's definitely not too late if you don't have media examples now. Just go onto Google. Just Google the topic you're looking for and look through the news articles. And basically for your media examples, what you want to do is you want to analyze like what happened, who said something. If it was like a whole speech, obviously you don't need to quote the whole speech, but just give a general overview of the language use, the media's response to that, and how it's reflecting the topic. For my media examples, I had more like specific words that someone used, which I found was a lot easier to talk about rather than like a whole text in particular, because then I could talk about the specific like impact that that word had that they used. Does anyone have any more questions?
I might add something about the memorizing part
Yeah.
of the essay. So like if it works for you, that's good. But if it doesn't work for you, because it's like a lot of words, I think what I did during year 12 was I just made essay plans. So I'd plan like maybe I'd write a very like general question, but something that you can manipulate the content quite easily, or you can be like, that question is similar to this question, so something quite broad. And then I'd maybe practice writing introductions, because I thought that was actually quite difficult, just trying to put all the information in a really concise form. But the crux of it in the body paragraphs, maybe I'd write like topic sentences. Is that what you call them? Like the first line?
Yeah.
The topic, like I'd write the topic sentence and just maybe like know that I could substitute for if like depending on the question in the exam, and then dot points, like lots of dot points. And I would actually like color code my essays. So maybe I'd like in red, I'd put the meta language feature, and then in blue, I'd do the topic sentence.
Yep.
And then like just use lots of different colors, maybe analysis for the meta language feature in another color, which would help me like visually learn and memorize that type of plan.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good way to plan. Definitely highlighters. I brought a lot of highlighters into the exam.
Yeah, but
really
like color coding is really, really useful, I found.
Yeah, actually that works for section B as well. I remember I did that for like all of my paragraphs. Say you have like 3 paragraphs and you want to like highlight the examples, like choose a specific color for one paragraph and highlight the examples you're going to use in that paragraph. And that was a really easy way to like make sure I knew which examples I was going to use for which, and so they didn't get mixed up, which was really good. You can also do that for section A, of course. I don't think we have any more questions. So we're wrapping up a bit early. Is that okay? Oh, thank you, Miranda. I just saw your comment in the chat.
Big smiley face.
Okay, so just to finish, we have to do an evaluation. So in order to access the recording, you have to do this. So if you could just go to the link, and then I think you'll have the option to like choose which subject. And yeah, so there'll just be some questions about how we did and what we can improve on. So if you go to that. Yeah.
Jess, it's Jane here. I'm just wondering if there might, hey, great job. Thank you both, Maddie and Jess. I'm wondering if there might be any chance for you to actually look at some specific exam questions and run through them with the students, given that we've got another 30 minutes.
Yeah, so I went through some before.
I just think that is the really valuable piece. You know, if you perhaps pick something off the VCAR website and just run through how you tackle it, because I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I'll just go to the VCAR website and share my screen. Yeah,
I think Lily is asking a question around, could you put the link in the chat, please?
Yeah, can do. One second, I'll just have to stop sharing my screen, then I'll put it in the chat.
I think very efficient for getting through the content nice and quickly, but it gives us an opportunity to do a couple more exam questions, which I think,
yeah, definitely.
I think are the ultimate key to success.
There's the link in the chat. Okay, so I'll just go to VCAR website now.
Thank you.
So I'll just share my screen. Okay, so we have the 2017 exam here. So this is what the exam will look like. It's probably good to see it in its full format. So what you'll have is section A. It will give you the instructions for section A, which we went through. We can see that the questions are here. So already we can see the social purpose. So again, highlighting how important that is. Question 2 is asking about prosodic features for the text, which we haven't seen yet. Question 3, this one we looked at in the PowerPoint before, but this was all about the identity of the speaker. And of course, question 4, discourse management strategies. So before I even look at the text, it's probably good to look at the exam in a whole. So basically what I would do is for section A, before even looking at the text, what I would do is just read through the questions and make sure I know what they're asking. So then when I look at the text, I can quickly identify those aspects of the text, which will make it much more efficient when I'm reading the text and highlighting what examples I need. So we know we're looking for social purpose, prosodic features, identity, language features that reflect the identity of the speaker, and of course the features, strategies of spoken discourse that he uses to manage the text, which these 2 questions we talked about in the PowerPoint. So my process would be to go through the questions, highlight the examples, and then what I would do, if I was answering section A first, I'd scroll down, and basically at the end you'll have removable inserts. So for section A and B, and here we have the context paragraph, which again, this example was in the PowerPoint. So what I would then do is go through the context paragraph, highlight key words such as Australian actor and comedian, where the text or the speech in this case was taking place, which again we know was the Logie Awards. A bit about what it's going to be about. So his television drama was about British colonisation and dispossession of Indigenous Australians, and then where it was performed, so in front of the live audience. So I would highlight these, and then just on the side, see how we have some space on this, or even down here. I would write my plan just down here. So I'd write the Mr. Crafts elements that I talked about, and then I would write what I want my topics to be. So I'd highlight the most important Mr. Crafts elements. So for example, we talked about like the audience and the social purpose here being very important. I would write those down like 1, 2, 3, and then I'd go through and identify which subsystems I wanted. So for example, we talked about phonetics or phonology. It's so like prosodics that he uses. And then I'd probably, like we talked about before, take the highlighters. So with one color, I'd go through and highlight prosodic features that I think would be really important to analyze in this text. So we can see up here the transcript just up the top. So we can use all these these transcriptions to work out like where the pauses and stuff are. And then, so I'd go through and identify the pause, the prosodic features, etc. So like where there's stress, so there's lots of underlined words here, so lots of emphatic stress being placed on stuff. And then I'd probably write a little note. I'd be like, emphatic stress is used to draw attention to specific things, such as specific people, or to like try and get the audience to relate to something. Then what I'd do, I'd go through that for all the paragraphs, and then I'd be able to answer my questions. So we're thinking about social purpose for the first question. I'll just scroll back up. So now that we've identified Mr. Crafts aspects and stuff, we can look at the social purposes. So we know it was for entertainment, and we can, we've highlighted examples, that relate to the purpose from the Mr. Crafts elements. We've looked at the prosodic features, of course, I just mentioned before. So there was lots of like pauses and breaths and emphatic stress and stuff. So that question would be worth 4 marks for there. So for a 4-mark question, I'd say to have possibly 2 to 3 examples, probably 3 would be best. So for this question, how I would go about it, just looking at it now, is I would, first of all, I'd have the word prosodic features highlighted. I'd make sure I've highlighted my examples. And then I would be like, the prosodic features used by the speaker between lines 12 and 20 reflect, like, for example, like the informal or formal nature of the text, which hence aids the social purpose of entertaining and building rapport with the audience. So that would be my starting sentence. Then I would go on to use an example. So I'd be like, emphatic stress is used on lines ... and ... which draws the audience's attention to, like, for example, the specific names he was mentioning, which encourages them to relate to him, or to, once like I already said, like, it draws attention to a specific aspect of his speech. And then I would go through, keep answering with examples. So I'd have another example, and you can just leave it as that. You don't need to wrap it up for section A, short answer, I would say. If you do have time and extra space, you could probably put a little concluding sentence that is similar to your topic sentence. That's something along the lines of the prosodic features help the speaker, like, appeal to his audience. I would say that's a very good way to sum up a short answer question. So this is the question about identifying the two specific language features that reflect Tim Minchin's identity. So for identity questions, this is all about the language someone uses and what it reflects about them. Like, it could be about their background or their age or their gender. So we know that he is an actor. We also know he's trying to appeal to his audience, and like, so he might be putting on a bit of a show, so it may not be truly reflective of his identity. But you look at the words he's using, like colloquialisms, like very Australian English terms, and you talk about his identity as, one, as an Australian, and two, as an actor. Then for question 4, what I would do, so we discussed this one before, but for the strategies of spoken discourse that he uses to manage this text, like I mentioned in the PowerPoint, obviously we decided that it's probably likely to be like a pre-prepared speech because it was at the Logies. So it's likely to, like, be pre-prepared, and it's going to have already put in place strategies to manage it, such as like pauses. He would have planned to put his pauses to move on to a different topic. He would have planned to have a welcome and a closing, and he would plan to have like a phrase at the end that will hand over the floor and indicate that he is done. So we know at the Logies we're going to have like a presenter. They would have called him up. He is likely to say like thank you at the start, and then thank you at the end as he hands over the floor back to the presenter. And that was it for section A. So you can see section A is quite easy. As long as you've identified all the Mr. Craft's elements of the text, you should be able to answer like any question you get in section A, so then you can get through that really quickly. Then for section B, so I'll pretend that I'm just looking at it now. So we just have the prompt, which is just write an analytical commentary. So let's go down to section B. Okay, so it is not supplied, but we do have a brief context paragraph, which is this article, House of the Week, written by Lou Sweeney, appeared in the real estate section domain of the Age newspaper. So even though that's a really short sentence, we can already see that it's going to be like a news article of sorts, possibly talking about the house itself, like why this house could be good. We know the author already, and it appeared in the real estate section, so it's likely to be advertising the house of the Age newspaper. And so you can think, like, what do you know about the Age newspaper? It's quite like a formal newspaper. It's read by a lot of people in Australia, possibly like of all ages, maybe a bit older. So even just from that short sentence, we can already analyze a lot about it. Sadly, we don't have the thing, the actual article, so I will skip that for now, and I'll go to section C, and if we have time, I'll look at a different section B example. Okay, So for section C, this is what you're going to see on the exam. As I mentioned in the PowerPoint, here are all the instructions for section C written by Vika. And so basically what you're going to get is you're going to get 3 different prompts. So you have question 6, 7, and 8, and you'll get various stimulus for each one. Also, I didn't mention this before, but try not to take stimulus material examples from other prompts if you're not using that prompt. The examiners will know, and they will think that you don't have your own media examples, and therefore you're probably going to not get the marks that you wanted. So just looking at these prompts now, we have the use of language in Australia today reflects social diversity. So it says discuss with reference to contemporary Australian society. So for this question, you'd be talking about all about like social diversity and the different use of language in Australia. So we have different ethnolects used. So let's have a look at the stimulus. So we have a quote, it looks like, from a news source. We can see that. So basically all the stimulus will give you where the quote or the thing was sourced from, who said it, and maybe a bit of background. So then you can refer to it in your essay. So we have lots of quotes here from a website even. We have some data. Yep, so from another website. So let's look at the next example. So first of all, what I would do is I'd read the prompt first. So I'm reading the prompt here. It's language is a powerful tool for influencing social attitudes within contemporary Australian society. Discussed referring to at least 2 subsystems, of course. So this is all about attitudes. So like I mentioned before, we have like the prescriptive attitude and descriptive, and like attitudes towards different language use in a society would be a very important thing to talk about in this prompt. So we can already see in the stimulus in A is talking about political correctness. So once again, very easy to find media examples for that. So I'd be starting to think that this prompt seems pretty good. I'd be pretty familiar with this prompt and have lots of media examples. Sometimes in the stimulus, they'll give you like a cartoon of sorts, or even one year I've seen like a text message conversation. So you can draw from these examples, you can just quote a part of it, or you can even just refer to the cartoon as a whole and explain the message it gives and why it relates to the language use, basically. Then we have a different quote, it seems, from a news source, and this one's from Sky News. I do recommend for English language to get familiar with like different major news sources. So we know Sky News is, I think it's a bit more of a conservative news source. So you could be seeing different attitudes from different news sources depending on like their political alignment and etc. So that may influence what they say. And we'll quickly look at prompt 8, even though I do like the look of prompt 7. So I'd look and I'd read through it. So it says, an understanding of standard Australian English is needed to be able to communicate in all contexts in contemporary Australian society. To what extent is this statement true? Okay, so this one's all about the standard and all about like whether it is needed to communicate all across Australia, basically. So I think this is a very interesting prompt as well. You have to have a solid understanding of the standard, like what it's used for, why we need it in the society. And then let's have a look at the prompts. So they're all just quotes, it seems, once again. So let's read prompt D. It seems interesting. So it says, although many young texters like to be different and enjoy breaking the rules, they also know they need to be understood. There is no point in paying for a message if it breaks so many rules of a language that it ceases to be intelligible. So that's talking about like young people using different language, basically. So that could be a good example of like why the standard is not needed in some contexts, because like you can use your own language and your own language that reflects your identity and still communicate effectively rather than using the standard. So basically you'd be discussing in this question like how you can use different language other than standard Australian English across Australia to effectively communicate your message. So the standard is probably not always needed. So it's asking you to talk about to what extent. So I'd probably say your topic sentence could be something along the lines of, it is sometimes needed. And that's it. So judging by those, I'd probably choose topic 7. I won't go through all the topics, my plan, sorry, but what I will do is I'll just find a proper example for section B that actually has one that is here, and I'll go through that. Okay, so for section B here, I'll go through briefly what I would do and how to write my analysis plan, because we have here a speech. So first of all, of course, for section B, remember what I said is to read the context paragraph first. So we'll read it and identify the Mr. Crafts elements. So from text 2, we have the following speech was given at a government house in Canberra by Australia's Governor-General, His Excellency General the Honourable Sir Peter Cosgrove, AKMC RETD, on the occasion of Australian Citizenship Day on 17th September 2016. During his speech, the Governor-General addresses little Lewis Kang, a small child who is present at the ceremony with his family. Okay, so before we even read the text, so I have not seen this text yet, but we know it's going to be a speech, so it's spoken, we've identified that. The register is very likely to be formal because it's occurring on Australian Citizenship Day, so that's like an event we would expect to be quite formal. We know who it's by, the Governor-General, and it's occurring on the day, so it's situational context. A speech at Government House, and it's occurring on Australian Citizenship Day. And then we know what he's going to be talking about in his speech, and we know that he's addressing someone else, like a small child, at the ceremony. So we've already identified like many elements of Mr. Crafts. So what I would do is I would write those down right there. I can already tell that some important things are going to be the social purpose and the cultural context. So we know that Australian Citizenship Day is for like when all people who are becoming citizens of Australia, so there's going to be lots of cultural context behind that. He may be giving some history about Australia and etc. And the audience is going to be important, so there's going to be people watching, so he's going to be using very formal language reflective of the situation he is in. So the register will be formal. Then what I would do, so I think my paragraphs are going to be something along the lines of prosodics, because it's a spoken speech, and how he uses that to manage his speech. It is very likely it's pre-prepared. So we'd probably be talking about like management strategies of the speech and how he holds the floor, and how he uses prosodics to draw emphasis to certain elements that might be about like welcoming people, etc. We also know the social purpose. There'll be probably a few social purposes. The main one, of course, is welcoming or the new citizens, giving people their citizenship, to Australia. So welcoming everyone at the ceremony. And also he wants to really relate to his audience. He wants to build rapport with his audience and appeal to them. That is probably a secondary purpose, I would say. Still very important though. So he wants to use language that will engage his audience. So what I would do then is I would go through all the examples and I'd quickly identify formulaic openings and closings that are common of a speech. So we're talking about like management strategies in this case. So he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, good morning." So that like indicates that he's starting his speech. He's addressing his audience already, so he's engaging them. And then he's giving a welcome from lines like 3 to 5, explaining what this ceremony is. And then it looks like he's giving some, the speech itself for becoming a citizen of Australia. And then, of course, here, lines 18 to 22, straight away, I can see that he repeats the phrases a nation of blah, blah, blah. So that's like probably examples of syntactic patterning. And like I said in the PowerPoint, that's quite common of pre-prepared speeches, particularly like a formal speech, that's like a welcoming speech in this case. So this is just really used to like appeal to his audience and just make it flow and coherent and just a really nice overall speech to hear, which he wants to appeal to his audience and of course make the new citizens feel very welcome. So what else are we looking for? So the social purpose, the main social purpose is to welcome the new citizens. So he'd be using lots of language, pointing to the citizens themselves and trying to make them feel like they are very welcome here, etc. And of course, he'd be trying to appeal to his audience. And we know that he's referring to a little child along these lines, around lines 48. So he's trying to appeal to all his audience from like a young age to an older age. And then he uses some, so when he's talking to the child, I can see now that he's, like on line 50, he says, I understand that playing with the hip hops. Then we have laughter on line 51. 52, he explains that hip hops refer to the kangaroos, is keeping the child busy enough for now. So he's trying to make a little joke. He's trying to relate, one, with the children of the audience, and two, also probably to the parents, because they will see that whoever's making this speech is good with children, you know, friendly. He uses laughter because he wants the audience to laugh along with him as well. So without even looking at this before, I can already tell that the main things, of course, was the social purpose, which is helped by the formal register and the audience in general. So that's how I would go about section B. Yeah, so I think that's very easy if you have a solid Mr. Crafts written down, because then you know what you're going to talk about and you can weave that into your analysis. And that's how I would go about it. I'll just check the time. We have just a few more minutes. I'll just quickly go through section A of this exam, just to give you one more example of how I would go about section A. So you can really know how you'll go about section A and B, and of course C. So without even reading section A of the text, first of all, it wants us to identify the register of the text one. So we're already going to write that down when we read through text one, but just keep that in mind. Question 2. So this is an example of a specific meta-language question that VCAR can ask. And it says, identify how the use of verbs in the present tense in lines 1 to 11 helps create the register. So what we've done before in the previous question is identify the register. And now we have to identify verbs that create that register or reflect that register. So first of all, you need to know what verbs are. You should know what verbs are. They could even ask a more specific question, like, for example, like a modal verb or auxiliary verb. Luckily, they've just asked about verbs in general. But do keep in mind that you should know there are different types of verbs and they could ask you. Then question 3, we talked about this one in the PowerPoint, but it's asking, using appropriate meta-language, we want to comment on 2 language features that reflect Colin Bissett's identity. So again, it's an identity question. So keeping identity in mind and what language, like what words the speaker uses that reflects himself. And lastly, it's asking us, using appropriate meta-language, we want to comment on 2 features in lines 17 to 26. So often the questions in section A will ask you to comment on a feature between a certain line. So you can't take features from other lines, you won't get the marks, you have to go between the lines that it specifies. Features that resemble spoken language. So because it says resemble spoken language, we can already guess that this is going to be a written text, but it's probably likely written in like a conversational tone. And we have one more question, which of course is the one about discourse, which is all about coherence and cohesion. So as you can see, these sorts of questions come up on most exams each year. So you really need to know how to answer a question about discourse and specifically what coherence and cohesion are. So let's quickly go to the text and just identify the Mr. Crafts elements. So we looked at this one in the PowerPoint, and we already know that this was the blog post. And so it was written in a very informal way, a very conversational tone. So the register, which was back at question 1, we know it's going to be an informal register. And then, because we have the whole text here now, what I would do is I'd be thinking about like the identity, because there was a question about the identity of the speaker. So first of all, in the context paragraph above, we are already told he's a writer, traveler, and broadcaster. So that tells us a lot about his identity already. What I would do then is go through and highlight words or like a sentence or like a reference to something that reflects his identity as a writer, traveler, and broadcaster. Keeping in mind, of course, like the discourse features. So we're looking for coherence and cohesion. There was a question on that. And I'll just go back to the questions. So we had the question on verbs in present tense in lines 1 to 11. So let's quickly answer this question. So from lines 1 to 11, verbs that create the register. So let's go to there. So let's look at lines 1 to 11. So we know it's informal register. First of all, on line 1, I see the verb I sit. So it's a present tense verb. So he's already like bringing us into his life as if he is doing it right in front of us, and he's trying to like appeal to us by building rapport, and he's essentially like having a conversation with us without actually being there. And on line 2, he says, I've jotted down, so he's writing down some things. So again, we're already finding verbs, present tense verbs that create the register. So the use of the present tense verbs definitely reflects the informal register. Again, on line 7, I see the verb scroll. So he's talking about he's scrolling on his phone. Again, so this is all in present tense. He's doing it as if he is sitting right in front of us, thus engaging the audience more effectively. So for a response to the question about the verbs, I would start off by saying, let's go back to the question. I would start off by saying the use of verbs, use of present tense verbs reflects the informal register of this text. Then I would say he like builds a conversational tone through the use of these present tense verbs, such as blah, 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 which basically engages the audience by basically he's like trying to create as if he's having a conversation with us. Obviously, I would word that better, but it's only 2 marks. So I would say just have an introduction, and then you would have your example and explain why that example of the present tense verbs creates this conversational tone. Okay, so we're almost out of time. So I'll just go back to the link. And if you haven't done the survey yet, this is it on screen. I know it was just posted in the chat before as well. And if everyone could do that link really quickly, that would be great. So I'll just give you a few seconds to click on that link, and then we can just wrap it up. Also, if anyone has any more questions, please feel free to ask in just the chat. While you're all doing that survey, I'll wrap it up now, I think. So thank you all for coming. This was a lot of fun. I really, really, really loved English language at school, so it was good to like review all this knowledge. I definitely recommend keeping on doing linguistics if you're interested in it at uni. So much better at uni. You can do the subjects you're actually interested in. Good luck for the exam. I hope all this gave you some tips about the exam and how to approach each section effectively. And yeah, Maddie, do you have anything to say?
Good luck, guys. Thanks, Jess. That was awesome. I learned a lot too. And hope you guys have a good time getting ready for your final exams, and it will fly by. And just try your hardest, and you won't have any regrets, and you'll have lots to look forward to next year. Uni's really fun.
Definitely.
Thanks very much, Jess and Maddie. Great presentation. And yeah, thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you.